I forgot to mention Father Richard Holung, who is with us visiting today. Father Holung is the founder of the Missionaries of the Poor, which is a religious order of brothers and priests and religious women who serve the poorest of the poor in Jamaica and several other countries throughout the world. And hopefully, as you know, we support their mission. We support them financially and also support a mission trip. Some of our parishioners actually go on a mission trip each year to work with them there in Jamaica. So we're happy to have you with us, Father Holung, so welcome to you. Father Holung actually has a very fascinating story of how he began this work. He actually began as a Jesuit priest and later heard another call to found the Missionaries of the Poor and to work with the poorest of the poor, similar to kind of Mother Teresa's call. But wanted to just share with you also very briefly, a little bit, as I often do, about my own vocation discernment. My time in seminary, I think I mentioned before, was such an important and transformative time in my life, and it shaped who I am as a priest for sure. And I often tell people that the reason that I went to seminary and I began discerning a vocation and started really trying to wrestle with what God was asking of me, the reason I sort of took those first steps is very different from the reason that I ultimately ended up being ordained a priest. I'll often look back at that time and I sort of look at the call that I felt and sort of realize I can't really even describe it exactly. There was just this sort of restlessness in my heart and a tug that I felt to maybe explore the priesthood. And so I just sort of took it a step at a time and just said, well, Lord, if this is what you're asking me, I'm just going to take this next step. But I certainly don't feel a call, especially a strong call to the priesthood. So I went to seminary, as I've said before, but I struggled a great deal for those first few years. And there were several times when I was very close to leaving seminary. But the Lord knew exactly what he was doing, and I think the struggle, as I said, was really transformative for me spiritually and theologically. And I think I've mentioned the reason ultimately why I really knew that God was calling me to be a priest was because of something one of my professors said in one of the classes. He said that he knew that he was called to be a priest because he realized at one point that the reason he was born was to offer the holy sacrifice of the Mass. And the Lord at one point really gave me that kind of clarity as well, that my mission was just that I was born to offer the holy sacrifice of the Mass. Now, certainly I know that being a priest involves a lot more than simply celebrating Mass and hearing confession and ministering the other sacraments. There's an expression that you may be familiar with, going from the sublime to the ridiculous. Going from the sublime to the ridiculous. Well, some days the priesthood feels just that, going from the sublime to the ridiculous, right? Where maybe I'll be doing something very solemn and very serious at one point, and then at the next point, I'll be doing something kind of funny and silly, right? And this Wednesday was a great example of that. So this past Wednesday, October 4th, you may remember, was the feast of St. Francis of Assisi. And so I woke up pretty early, as I normally do, and I made my holy hour. I spent an hour in quiet prayer, in adoration. And then we had confessions for one of our grade school classes at 8:15. And then I celebrated our school Mass, which we have on Wednesday mornings at 9 o'clock. But then at 10 o'clock, I grabbed my guitar and I went out into the garden with the preschool kids, and I led them in a rendition of Old MacDonald Had a Farm. Because it's a feast of St. Francis, we sing Good St. Francis Had a Farm. And the kids all had their little stuffed animals that they brought in, and I led them in making the barnyard animal noises, as we sang the song. So it really was kind of from the sublime to the ridiculous. But both were very beautiful things nonetheless. But the rest of the day was pretty typical. I had lots of meetings with my staff members, a counseling session with someone, and then in the evening I taught our family catechesis, and then we had more confessions until about 7:30. Then I came home and had dinner with the priests, And then I got on my computer for about 2 hours and started returning emails. So sometimes people say, well, I know, Father, you work on Sundays, but what do you do for the other 6 days? Well, I often respond, well, Sunday is actually my easiest day. As I mentioned, there's a lot more that priests do than simply celebrate Mass on Sundays. I think most of you know that St. Catherine's is a huge operation. We're a parish of over 3,200 families. We're one of the largest parishes in the Archdiocese. We have over 50 ministries and programs that we support, from our various faith formation and liturgical ministries to our different community building and outreach programs and ministries. And then we also have a K-8 grade school with over 330 students. And then we have a preschool with about 130 children. And now we have a high school on our campus as well. And between our parish and our schools, we have about a $6 million budget and about 100 staff members. So as you can imagine, there's lots of administrative kinds of things that need to be taken care of as well. Now, I'm not telling you all this because I want you to think that being a priest and being a pastor is so difficult. Actually, to be honest with you, being a priest here at St. Catherine's is pretty easy because it's such a great parish, and I have the best staff in the world, and I absolutely love it, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. But I guess I was just reflecting on the gospel today, right? We heard about these tenants and the landowners and the vineyard, right? And the Lord is making it clear that he is expecting the leaders that he has entrusted to care for his vineyard, really, and the vineyard is representative, in this case, of the Old Covenant people, right? But he's pointing to the leaders of the New Covenant people, right? He is expecting that the leaders who he has entrusted to care for his people, he's expecting them to be faithful and to bear fruit. Right? The leaders that God originally entrusted, right, for his vineyard, they failed to live in accord with God's authority that he had given them. Right? And so now the Lord is entrusting his vineyard to the New Covenant church, with the leaders, particularly the bishops and his priests, to really be shepherds and fathers of his people. And that's how I see my role as the pastor of this parish, as the father of a great family. Right? And just like every father has to be responsible not just for the spiritual health and well-being of the family, although that's foundational, right? But he also has to be responsible for the material and even financial needs of the family. And so too, a priest and a pastor has to be concerned about all of these things. And we are so blessed here at St. Catherine's. I've witnessed so many just profound and exciting things happen here over the last 7 years that I've been here as your pastor. Right? So many lives have been touched, not just by my ministry as a priest, but because of you all and your ministry here in the parish and your support and your participation in so many of the beautiful ministries that we have here in the parish. But there's still so much work to be done. Right? The Lord is calling us to continue to bear fruit. He's calling us to recognize, as I've said many times, first and foremost, that he has entrusted us, all of us, with so many gifts, right? And that we have to be grateful for this and recognize that we have then a responsibility to use these gifts to serve the Lord, to give back to the Lord for everything that he's given to us. And I think as Christians, we recognize that we all have a call to be a light to the world. A world that is suffering in so many ways. A world that's suffering from error and lies and confusion, from attacks on the dignity of the human person, attacks on marriage and the human family, attacks on the poor, right? Exploitation of the poor and vulnerable. And it's our mission as a church, as a family of God, and particularly as a parish, to be a light to our community and to the world, to bring healing and hope and peace to the world that is experiencing darkness and that's in need of the gospel. And this ultimately is how each of us personally embraces our call to holiness. Right? I talked about that universal call to holiness that each of us has. Right? And so in living out this call, we embrace, right, the invitation that the Lord has called each of us to a life of holiness. And I want to speak to you today and ask you to continue to help me as the father of this family, our parish, to make sure that our family remains strong so that we can continue to do all of the things that the Lord has called us to do as a parish, but also to answer our own personal call to holiness. You know, this week we're kicking off a special stewardship campaign. And the theme of the campaign is what I just mentioned, embracing the call to holiness. And this campaign is directed specifically to increasing our offertory, our regular giving, to help sustain and hopefully grow our ministries and our programs that we have here in the parish. This coming week, if you're a registered parishioner, you'll receive a mailing from me, which includes a brochure that speaks about many of the important ministries that we're engaged in the parish and the importance of playing a part in supporting these ministries. I could speak for hours about these ministries, but we don't have the time now. But ask you to please make sure to take a look at the brochure and see, right, all the beautiful things that are happening in the parish. And then you'll also receive a commitment card in the mailing as well. And so I'd ask you to spend some time this week and just talk to your spouse if you're married and pray about the commitment, the sacrificial commitment that you can make to support the parish and the ongoing needs of the parish. And I've spoken before about the tradition that we have of the biblical tithe, which means giving 10% of your income. And a good rule, as I mentioned, is 5% to the parish, 1% to the Archbishop's annual appeal, and then 4% to other worthy charitable organizations. And so I'd ask you to really pray if you can give at that level, right? That is a sacrificial commitment that the Lord is placing before us. And if you're not able to give at that level, I'd ask you to just consider what you can give. If you're not giving anything right now regularly, I'd ask you to really pray about why that is. And if you can at least begin giving something. If you are currently giving, maybe consider if you can increase your gift. And next weekend, we will have an opportunity to make that commitment together. So you can bring your commitment card with you to Mass, and we will make that commitment together, right, and really make a sacrificial gift to the Lord. But I want to thank you all again for your generosity and for your support of me personally and of our parish. And as we continue with this Mass now, I ask you to please pray for the success of this campaign. And let's pray especially that the Lord would continue to bless our parish abundantly and allow all of our efforts to serve him to bear great fruit.